The stranger in the snow. The storm hit harder than Clara Mae Whitlow had expected. Wind howled like a wounded animal across the pines, rattling the shutters of her cabin and covering the world in a thick blanket of white. Inside, Clara sat hunched over a crackling fire, knitting with stiff fingers and sipping bitter dandelion tea. Her world had been quiet for 2 years since her husband, Matthew, passed from fever. She had grown used to the silence, even welcomed it. But that day, the silence cracked. It started with the sound of boots dragging through the snow. Clara froze. She set down her cup and reached for the old shotgun above the hearth. Unloaded, but it looked intimidating enough. When she opened the door, her breath caught. A man, barely conscious, collapsed in her doorway. Snow clung to his coat, and blood soaked through a torn sleeve. His face was gaunt, wind-burned, and unfamiliar. "Help, please," he whispered, then went limp. Clara stood in the doorway a moment longer, pulse pounding. She'd heard the stories: bandits, deserters, worse. But something in the man's voice wasn't threatening. It was desperate. With effort, she dragged him inside, laid him near the fire, and shut the door against the storm. His clothes were soaked through. She hesitated only a moment before unbuttoning his coat and peeling it off. Beneath, she saw the wound, a long, angry gash along his shoulder, probably from a fall or a sharp branch. Not a bullet. That comforted her, somewhat. The stranger drifted in and out of fever for 2 days. Clara fed him spoonfuls of broth, pressed cool rags to his brow, and watched the storm rage on outside. He muttered nonsense in his sleep. Names, apologies, regrets. When he finally opened his eyes, she was by the stove, stirring soup. "Where am I?" he rasped. "My cabin," she replied without turning. "You were half dead when I found you." He sat up slowly, wincing. "I'm grateful." "Name's Thomas. Thomas Rourke." Clara studied him. He had pale green eyes, rough hands, and a voice like split oak, firm, steady. Not the kind of man to beg. Something about that struck her. "I'm Clara Whitlow," she said. "Widow. You're lucky I heard you." Thomas nodded. "I didn't expect to survive." He didn't say much more that day, nor the next. But in the small confines of the cabin, silence couldn't stretch forever. By the week's end, they spoke often about weather, woodcutting, the price of cornmeal in town. He had a dry wit and good manners. He offered to chop firewood once his arm mended. He complimented her stew, and he never once overstepped. Still, Clara remained cautious. On the 7th day, as the snow thawed just enough for boots to crunch over mud again, trouble arrived. Sheriff Durnall was a square-jawed man with a permanent squint. He stepped into her yard with 2 others behind him. Town gossips, Clara suspected, and rapped twice on her door. Clara opened it, her expression unreadable. "Afternoon, Clara," the sheriff said, doffing his hat. "We heard there was a man staying here." "Stranger." Clara's jaw tightened. "He was dying. I did what was right." Thomas stood behind her now, stiff and upright. "Sheriff. Name's Thomas Rourke. I'll be out of your county as soon as I can ride." Durnall frowned. "See, it ain't that simple. You been sleeping under a woman's roof, and you ain't kin. Folk around here see that as indecent, even if you were just recovering." Clara's hands clenched at her sides. "He's done nothing wrong." "I believe you," the sheriff replied gently. "But the law's clear. Either he marries you, or you both answer to the circuit judge for unlawful cohabitation." For a moment, time hung still. Clara looked at Thomas. His expression was unreadable, but she saw something flicker there. Regret? Guilt? Or was it resignation? "I'll marry her," he said simply. The words echoed in her chest like a hammer against steel. Married by the law. The wedding took place 2 days later, in the cramped front room of Sheriff Durnall's office. No flowers, no music, just a dry recitation of vows between 2 strangers, witnessed by a clerk and the sheriff's wife, who couldn't stop glancing at Clara like she was either brave or pitiful. Clara stood tall, her back straight, her eyes forward. Her best dress, the navy calico one, fit tighter than it used to, and she hadn't bothered with a bonnet. Thomas wore the cleanest shirt Clara could spare. His shoulders still ached from the healing wound, but his voice didn't falter as he said the words. I do. So simple, so final. Clara echoed him, lips steady, heart not. By law, they were husband and wife. By heart, that was more complicated. Back at the cabin, Thomas was quiet. He helped unload supplies Sheriff Durnell insisted they accept, a small wedding gift from the county to avoid scandal. A bag of beans, soap, a new frying pan. Clara placed them away methodically, hands moving on instinct. That night, they sat across from each other at the hearth, the silence between them louder than any storm. You're angry, Thomas said finally, his voice low. Clara looked up from her knitting. I'm not. You should be. She set the yarn down. I didn't ask for this. But neither did you. Thomas nodded. He stared into the fire like it held answers. I'll sleep in the barn, he offered. Until spring. Then I'll move on. Clara thought about the frozen rafters, the thin hay pile, the wind that cut through the boards. You'll catch your death again. Then I'll build a shed out back. Anything to make this easier. She sighed. You'll sleep by the hearth. It's warm. And that's all that matters. He gave a slight nod. Thank you, Clara. She didn't respond. Days passed. The townsfolk stopped coming by. The scandal had been neutralized by marriage, and small minds turned elsewhere. Clara resumed her routine, chopping kindling, checking the snares, mending what needed mending. Thomas kept his promise. He didn't push. He hauled water, patched the leaky roof, even helped birth one of the goats when it struggled in the snow. He worked hard. He was respectful. But Clara couldn't bring herself to trust the quiet. One morning, she found him carving something behind the cabin. A small figurine, a bird, shaped carefully from pine, wings outstretched mid-flight. For your mantle, he said, setting it there without meeting her gaze. It's beautiful, she admitted. Did you learn that back east? He paused. Yes, I used to carve things when I was young. My father taught me. It was the first real detail he'd given about his past. Clara asked, cautiously, where is your family now? His answer was slow. Gone. All of them. She sensed the lie, or maybe just the omission. Still, she let it pass. One evening, a heavy rain trapped them inside. Thunder rolled, and candlelight flickered across the walls. Thomas was sitting at the table, drying his boots. Clara sat by the fire, sipping tea. He spoke first. You saved my life. And now, I've put yours in turmoil. Clara looked at him. He seemed older than when he'd first collapsed at her doorstep. Wearier, as though he carried burdens no one could see. Turmoil, she echoed softly. This world's full of it. You're not the cause. He gave a small smile. Still, I want to do right by you. She turned back to the fire. What would right even look like, Thomas? I don't know, he admitted, but I'd like the chance to find out. They sat in silence, broken only by the patter of rain. Outside, spring whispered in the distance, but inside, something warmer stirred. It wasn't love yet, but it wasn't cold either. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of bread baking. Thomas had found her old flour sack and made something possible. They shared breakfast without words, but with something close to peace. As he washed the dishes, she asked quietly, why were you out in the woods that day? What were you running from? He hesitated, hands still in the basin. Then slowly, he replied, a mistake. One I thought I could bury in snow and silence. Clara didn't press further, but in her chest, something shifted. Curiosity, worry, or was it intuition? Whatever it was, it wasn't finished yet. The woman in the wagon. The first signs of spring crept across the valley. Green buds on birch trees, the shrill cry of returning birds, and a thaw in the earth that made Clara's boots sink as she walked the trail. Life was stirring again, but Clara's heart remained locked in a quiet frost. Thomas had grown gentler with the weeks. He no longer offered to leave. He read aloud in the evenings, carved little animals for the windowsill, and built a pen for the goats without being asked. His silence about the past still lingered like smoke after a fire, thin, unsettling. Clara wasn't sure she was falling in love with him or simply getting used to his presence. Then the wagon arrived. It creaked down the hill one pale morning, drawn by a pair of bay horses and covered in a canvas dusted with road mud. Clara was hanging laundry when it came into view. A lone rider followed behind it, carrying a small leather satchel and a tense jaw. Clara stepped forward, wiping her hands on her apron. The wagon rolled to a halt, and a woman stepped down. Tall, pale, elegant. Her cloak was trimmed in lace, her gloves spotless despite the road. Her eyes, when they met Clara's, were flint. "You must be Clara Whitlow," the woman said in a clipped accent. "Or should I say, Clara Rourke?" Clara's heart stilled. "I am." The woman smiled coldly. "I'm Eliza. Eliza Rourke, Thomas's wife." The words shattered the morning air like glass against stone. Behind her, Thomas appeared in the cabin doorway. His face drained of color the moment he saw Eliza. His mouth opened, but no sound came. "You?" Clara whispered, stumbling back a step. "You said your family was gone." Thomas moved forward, palms open. "Clara, please. Don't." Her voice cut through his like a whip. "You lied." Eliza folded her arms. "I thought he was dead. Disappeared from Richmond 6 months ago. Now I find him married again, living in a shack with another woman." "It wasn't like that," Thomas said, voice cracking. "Eliza, you and we were over long before I left." "That's not what the courts said," Eliza snapped. "You're still legally mine, and you've committed bigamy." Clara stayed at him. "Is that true?" Thomas's silence was answer enough. Eliza didn't stay long. She handed the sheriff's deputy a folded letter and told him to deliver it to the courthouse in the next town. "Let the law decide how to clean this mess," she declared. She looked at Clara one last time, her eyes pitiful and mocking. "You poor thing. He fools everyone eventually." Then she climbed into the wagon and disappeared down the road. Inside the cabin, Clara didn't speak. She sat at the table, staring at the wall. Thomas stood nearby, shattered in a silence of his own making. "I never meant to deceive you," he said, voice low. "My marriage to Eliza, it was hollow, cold. She cared more about social standing than love. We hadn't spoken in months. I didn't think she'd follow me." "You didn't think," Clara said quietly, "or you didn't care." He flinched. "I didn't want to ruin what we had." "What we had," she repeated bitterly. "We don't have anything, Thomas. You brought ruin the moment you let me believe you were free." Thomas dropped to his knees beside her chair. "I swear to you, Clara, I never meant for this. I was running from a life I hated, from a woman who never loved me. But you were real. You gave me peace. You gave me warmth." She turned her head, blinking back tears. "And I gave you trust," she said, "and you broke it." By nightfall, Thomas was gone. Clara didn't throw him out. She didn't have to. He packed his things in silence and walked out the door without asking for forgiveness again. She didn't watch him leave. Instead, she sat by the hearth with the carved bird in her hands, tracing its wings with her thumb. It no longer looked free to her, just unfinished. Outside, the wind had changed. Not the cold bite of winter, but something heavier, sadder, like the earth was mourning something it hadn't yet named. In the days that followed, Clara didn't speak much. She worked harder, walked farther, sat longer in the evenings, staring into flames that didn't warm her like before. But something inside her was hardening, not into bitterness, but into clarity. She had lost trust, but she hadn't lost herself. The choice of the heart. Spring bloomed with a fury that mocked Clara's grief. Wildflowers pushed through the thawed earth, bees hummed along the fence posts, and the sky remained cruelly blue. The world moved on, even if she hadn't. Clara had not spoken Thomas's name in 2 months. She worked from dawn to dusk, repairing the shed, managing the animals, even helping the neighbors with planting. She moved like a woman possessed, driven not by anger but by determination. She would not be pitied. She would not be undone. The scandal had passed like a brief illness through town, replaced by a new round of gossip. Clara kept her head down and her voice polite, but the spark in her eyes had cooled, and everyone saw it. Then, one afternoon, he returned. He came on foot, a single pack slung over his shoulder, hair longer, eyes heavier. Clara was feeding the chickens when she saw him at the edge of her land. Her body stiffened before her heart could catch up. She didn't run, didn't speak, just watched. He didn't come closer than the gate. "I won't step beyond this fence unless you ask me," Thomas said, voice rough from travel or regret. "I just needed to see you one last time." Clara folded her arms, not as defense, but as armor. "Why?" "I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not to win you back, just to make sure you knew it." Her silence was unreadable. "I was a coward," he continued. "I should have told you the truth the moment I walked into your cabin. I used your kindness as shelter. I told myself lies because I wanted to believe I could be a better man here. With you." "And were you?" she asked quietly. He looked down. "I was trying." Clara stepped forward. "Eliza, did you go back to her?" "No, she didn't want me. Not really. She just wanted control. She filed for annulment after the court ruled on our separation." "So you're a free man now?" "In the eyes of the law, yes." Her jaw tightened. "But not in mine." Thomas nodded. "I don't blame you." They stood in silence, spring wind brushing against them like a memory. "I've been carving again," he said finally. "Gave most of it away to children in the towns I passed. Left a few at churches. It kept my hands busy, kept my thoughts less cruel." He reached into his pack and pulled out a small wooden box. "This one's yours. No strings, just truth." Clara took it carefully. Inside was a perfectly carved robin, perched on a branch, its beak open in mid-song. Delicate, intricate, alive in every curve. It looked like it could fly from her palm. "I made it the night I left," he said. "Didn't know if I'd ever give it to you." Clara traced the wings with her thumb. Her eyes stung, but no tears fell. "You hurt me, Thomas," she said softly. "Not just with your lies. With your silence. You let me build something real on foundations that weren't. I know. I don't hate you, but I don't know if I can ever trust you again." He stepped back. "Then I'll go. I meant what I said. I didn't come to plead. I just wanted to take responsibility before the road carried me farther away." Clara looked down at the bait again. It was beautiful, fragile, like her heart. "Wait," she said as he turned. He stopped. She met his eyes. "I'm not asking you to stay. Not yet. But the shed out back needs a new roof. If you're willing to work for your meals, you can earn your place here. One day at a time." Hope flickered across his face, tentative, raw. "I'm not promising love," she added. "I'm promising a chance." "That's more than I deserve," he replied. "No," she said, her voice steady. "It's exactly what you learn, if you mean it." By summer, Thomas was still there. He built the shed, repaired the well, and planted herbs she hadn't had time for. He never overstepped, never asked for more than was offered. Each day, he showed up in quiet ways, carving a new wooden bird, leaving a cup of tea by her chair, asking how she slept. Clara never said, "I forgive you." But one night, she handed him a second blanket and pointed to the spot near the hearth. "Stay warm," she said. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a vow. But it was something. Something real. Something chosen. And sometimes that was where love began again. Not with passion, but with permission.